Welcome back, everyone, to Reading by Candlelight at Molly's Cottage. I'm with Bronwyn Rivers tonight, debut author of The Reunion, which features in the Reading by Candlelight February crime and thriller book box. Welcome, Bronwyn. It's so lovely to have you here.
Thanks, Fiona. I'm really delighted to be here.
Now, as I mentioned, this is your debut novel, and it was published on February the 11th, so it's only been out for 2 weeks now. Congratulations. You must be so excited.
Yes, it has been a really fun 2 weeks, and I am really excited. I mean, after all the time I spent writing it, like all those days and hours sitting at my desk by myself, and it was actually done a while ago because the publishing process takes longer than you think. So finally seeing it in the flesh on a bookshelf in real life shops was just really exciting.
It must be. Now, before we start, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Bronwyn. And she grew up in Newcastle, and we have something in common, Bronwyn. We both loved reading Famous Five and Agatha Christie books when we were growing up. And I also have a sister named Bronwyn.
Well, there you go. It was destined that we should speak to each other.
Now, what I'm really fascinated with is that you studied your doctorate at Oxford University.
Yes, I did. Yes, and that was absolutely it was so fun. Even while I was there, I was thinking this is a bit like a dream come true. A sort of a step out of real life for about 3 or 4 years.
Oh, it would. It'd be so
Mm.
amazing. It was such a beautiful place. Now, your background is as an academic researcher and a book reviewer in the UK and in Australia, but you've come over to the dark side and now you write crime fiction set in the Australian landscape while living in Sydney with your family. Now, The Reunion's a story of friendship, secrets, grief, and guilt. Can you give us a spoiler-free pitch of your book?
Sure thing. So it is set in the Blue Mountains west of Sydney, and the story is about six teenagers who go for a hike into that wilderness, but only five come out alive. Now, 10 years later, the remaining friends are reuniting at the home of Ed's mother, Martha. Ed is the boy who died. Martha lives in a farmhouse deep within that forest. When they get there, the farmhouse is really run down. Martha is in a bad way. It's very hot, it's very isolated, and it's clear that something is about to go horribly wrong. So the question is, what really happened to Ed Fletcher all those years ago? And how far will someone go in order to get the truth?
Oh, I see. It sounds amazing. And you did so well because you didn't give away anything.
Yes,
Now,
I'm practiced at giving spoiler-free pictures. You can't give any spoilers in a crime novel.
no, not at all.
Mm.
But what I loved most about was that you told the story using two timelines because everybody knows I love a double timeline plot. They are my absolute favorites. Did you set out to write it that way, or did it come about because you needed to hide things?
It wasn't one of the first things I thought about when I wrote the book, but I'm interested in these stories that are about secrets from the past, long buried secrets from the past that people want to stay buried but can't. So things like Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca.
Oh,
You probably sure you know and love that book. There's also Ruth Rendell's A Fatal Inversion. And so I pretty early on knew that there would be something in the past that a bunch of people in the present would have to deal with. And the thing in the past has to be important enough to create a kind of something has to be at stake. A fair bit has to be at stake. So it has to be a significant thing. And to really explain that properly, it's more powerful to tell it sort of in scene rather than just summarizing it. And so once I worked that out, I realized I couldn't just tell the past story and then move on to the present story. It's just a bit more engaging if you're sort of interweaving them together and sort of, and then I can have a lot of fun with it as well, because one thing I enjoyed about crime writing is the structure is very important. Like you say, you can't give away things too early. You've really got to think really hard about what you say when. And so I really like that kind of structuring element of it. And I actually found it quite fun to start weaving those stories together, because if you do it well, what you reveal in one timeline makes something in the other timeline look different once the reader finds that piece of information. So I did really quite enjoy that part of it.
absolutely, because I think that's what I love the most about dual timeline plots is the fact
Mm.
that it shows things in the other timeline a different way.
Mm.
Now, a lot of people have said that this has a touch of Australian Gothic about it. And so what was it about this story that made you want to write it?
It came from a few different sort of motivations. So, like I said before, I was really interested in a story that was about a secret from the past coming to the present, and both Daphne du Maurier and Ruth Rendell are really drawn to the focused on interpersonal psychology and motivation, and I like that too. And I really like in those kind of psychological thriller novels the strong, tense atmosphere of these settings where there's always an element of fear or threat, and that's often described as Gothic. So I suppose I didn't think I'm going to write a novel that's a bit Gothic, but it was those elements were part of what I find interesting about psychological thrillers. So yeah, I wouldn't say I set out to write a Gothic novel, but people have said that, and I can certainly see it in there as well. There's so many other, like, I mean, people have already said, oh, there's an element of Picnic at Hanging Rock there, because the
Oh,
whole
yes.
bunch of people go into the bush, not all of them come out, what really happened to the other person, and that's cited as an example of Australian Gothic. And once you start looking for it, you can trace that kind of trope, or that sort of scary Gothic element, back through Australian writing for a couple of hundred years, really.
Yes, and it's a
Mm.
very strong part of the book as well. It's so atmospheric. Now, how long did it take you to write it? I know you said that you wrote it a few years ago. So how long altogether did it take, do you think?
Well, this particular manuscript, yes, I was lucky enough to take some leave so I could work on it full time, which is a real luxury because that really helps you get completely into the mindset of the book. Like if you're trying to shift between day job and writing, then you kind of spend a bit of time when you go back to the writing mentally readjusting. So that really helped me focus and work on it much faster. And I was also doing an online writing course at the time, which was really good because that gave me some deadlines I had to meet. So I wrote the first draft and then put it aside for a week and then rewrote it completely. And I reckon I did that in about 6 months all up, 6 or 7 months all up, which is quite fast. But
Yes.
I was able to work on it full time, all day, every day, and I had already thought through some of the elements of the book a year or two previously. So it didn't sort of start from scratch in terms of, for me, the thinking time is actually a fair bit of it. Like the actual getting the words out once I know what I'm doing is not so time consuming. But if I've got my thoughts clear and I know where I'm going and how I'm going to structure it and what kind of information I need to get across, the actual writing of it doesn't take as long.
Yes, so obviously you planned.
Mm-hmm. I am a planner, not a pantser.
Excellent. Now,
Yeah.
the reunion has received a lot of extremely positive reviews, which you must be so excited about. But since it was released, and it has been called The Dry Meets the Hunting Party. Now, how much of that comparison to our very own Jane Harper, who we love, and UK author Lucy Foley, what did that mean to you?
Well, I think that description is great because what it does is it unites the locked house or country house mystery. I think of them as country house mysteries that Lucy Foley was doing with the hunting party. So listeners will probably know that writers like Agatha Christie were known for this. And then There Were None is a really good example where a bunch of people go away, often for a weekend, often quite literally to a country house, like a house set in a remote landscape. And they're thrown together for that time and they can't get away and something bad happens. And what's interesting about it is that kind of pressure cooker environment where people are away from their normal supports and their normal life. And there was all these relationships happening in that contained space. And the dynamics of those relationships are really quite interesting. And there's also that element of threat because often people quite literally can't get away. So in Lucy Foley's book, the group of friends are trapped by a really snowy landscape and then There Were None. They're on an island. And so that was, I found those books really interesting for those reasons. And that's the sort of hunting party element of that quote. And I thought, oh, I'm really quite interested in these stories. I read Agatha Christie growing up. I really would like to write one, but I'd like to give it an Australian setting because I don't think many writers have done it with an Australian setting. And I always thought Australian landscape is just perfect for this kind of book because it's very beautiful, but it's also quite often harsh and often a bit creepy. So that was kind of one of the as well as thinking about psychological thrillers and the things we talked about a moment ago with those gothic elements, that was kind of a really motivating force for me to take a country house or locked room mystery and put it into an Australian setting.
Well, see, you got me at Dual Timeline, but you definitely got me at Locked Room because I love those as well. Because
Mm,
I think that you just have a small cast of characters, and then
mm,
you're concentrating on trying to work out who done it. So I loved that as well. Now,
mm.
how important was it for you to set the book in the Blue Mountains?
Yes, that was another very important thing for me. So I knew I wanted to give my country house or locked room mystery an Australian setting, partly because I think that would really suit that style of book, but I also enjoy writing about landscape because I enjoy that slightly more lyrical or poetic kind of language. So if you're describing something beautiful like a landscape, then you can kind of indulge yourself in that a little bit. And I thought, oh, what's a landscape that would suit this kind of book that I love, that I like writing about? And the Blue Mountains was the obvious choice because it's extremely beautiful. And it's also a little bit creepy. You've got those very, very steep cliffs. You've got these valleys that are deep, and to go bushwalking, you often have to walk down into the valley. So it provides lots of nice metaphors around burrowing into things and burrowing down below the surface level to get to the secrets. And I particularly love the Blue Mountains because I've been there so often. So growing up in Newcastle, it's about 2 hours drive from the mountains, and my parents would take me there pretty much every year for a holiday, usually in winter, and we would go bushwalking in the cold. And when I was quite little, I kind of whinged and moaned. Then I grew to love it myself, and now I take my kids there, and they whinged and moaned a bit, but now they like it too. So I know the landscape really well just from memory, and it feels like a sort of second or third home. Not that I'm quite fortunate enough to have an actual home there, but I feel it really feels very familiar to me. So I was able to call it up really very easily, trying to draw on that landscape for the setting of the book.
It's a very beautiful place.
Mm.
Set. So, and it does lend itself to many things, and one of those is a very spooky type of landscape. Now, you
And I'll just say on the Blue Mountains, the cover of the book has a photograph of the Blue Mountains on it. It's a particular valley in the Blue Mountains called the Gross Valley, and I actually took the photo, which gives the book an extra thrill for me.
wow.
Yeah, it was quite special. We went through a couple of options for the cover, and at one point the designer said, "Oh, let's give it a strong landscape element, and I'll have to look up some Blue Mountains sort of photos for inspiration." I said, "I've got this. I have so many photos of the mountains, so I'll send you a whole bunch." And I didn't expect her to pick one out, but she did. She gave me quite a few treatments, and in the end, my editor and my agent and we all agreed that this particular design was the best, and it was the one that happened to use my photos. So that sort of makes it a kind of extra special. Like they did Photoshop the sky, but the valley itself was a photo I took.
Honestly, I think you're the very, very first author I've ever spoken to who's done that. That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. I've known authors to kind of like give ideas or to send something back or, have a mood board, but never, ever has anybody ever said that they took the photo that's on the cover of their book. That's amazing, Bronwyn. Well done.
Yeah, I really didn't expect that. Like I just sent it to the publisher as a bit of extra inspiration. So it was a really lovely surprise, and we all agreed that was the best design. So.
That's gorgeous. I love that. That's a really interesting fact about it. It's great. Now you have I didn't prep you as to asking about your characters, but I really want to ask you a question about your characters in line with who was the favorite to write?
Oh, that is a good question. Don't really have a favorite. I mean, when readers read the book, they'll find that, so there's 5 friends returning, so I guess that they get the most sort of page time because they're the main characters. And I was really conscious of trying to give them all equal airtime, if you like. And when I did my writing courses over the years, I was told, you must have a protagonist. You must have one main character. And I thought, oh, I don't know about that. Like, I think I know a bunch of these books which don't really have a protagonist. I'm not sure that that's really true. And I sort of dug into it a bit, and I found a bit of theorizing about how multiple protagonist stories can work if it's a group of people. They all have to have something in common, but the group sort of becomes a character in a way. So the group goes on a little journey from having a misapprehension about something, and it faces all these trials and tribulations, and then it ends up somewhere else as a result of what the group's been through. So that was the sort of thing I had in my mind. And I was quite deliberately thinking, no, I won't make one of them the main character. I need to kind of have them all as equal participants. And the other reason not to make a kind of main character in this situation is because readers will automatically think, oh, they're significant in some way. Either they did it or they're going to have something done to them. I didn't really want to kind of flag anything like that. So I am hoping people feel that about the group, that until quite towards the end, they don't think, oh, that person's getting a bit too much time. Maybe they're the significant person here. But I enjoyed writing all of them, really, because I mean, a good character is rounded and full and has good points and bad points. And so I guess I liked all of them in the end, because I was trying to make them, even though they all pretty much do things that they're not proud of, so they're certainly not perfect. I was really conscious of trying to make them sympathetic and try and help the reader understand why they each do the things they do. And by the end of going through that process in writing them, I sort of felt quite sympathetic for them and a bit protective of each of them in a way, really, because I sort of really understood what they'd been through. And I put a bit of backstory in there for each of them, and I had a bit more in my head. So I think I liked all of them, really.
Oh, that's good, isn't it? Because I know sometimes when I speak to authors, and they always say, oh, I like this one because they were the most fun to write. It's always the one that's really nasty. I think people enjoy writing nasty characters.
Yeah, it's true. I guess I did. I like Hugh, because Hugh's got a bit of a sense of humor, so I kind of liked throwing in his humorous voice in there. And I guess people will learn soon enough, pretty much straight away, that Martha is not a happy person. She's in a bad way, and so kind of bring that to life on the page was quite fun too. So there you go. I gave you a couple of names.
Now, Reading by Candlelight is for readers, but we do get a lot of writers who are members of our book club. Can you share a piece of advice to aspiring writers? And, if you could, what would it be?
I have had a bit of a think about this one. I'm going to give 3 pieces of advice, sorry. So one is that it's really all about your motivation in the end. Like with writing, no one makes you sit down at the desk, and if you don't write, you're not going to get in trouble. Your boss is not going to rouse on you. So to do it, you have to be motivated, and you have to have the motivation yourself. So I guess that's one thing, because quite a lot of sacrifice in terms of time and possibly money is involved. So you really have to want it yourself quite strongly, because you'll soon discover there's hills to climb. And then more practically, I think it's really useful to have other readers read your work. Like, it's a bit of an unpleasant experience at first. You've put these things on the page and you're feeling all protective and a bit shy and uncertain. But as soon as you can, find a group of trusted people to give your work to, so that they can read it and give you feedback, because it just improves the writing out of sight to have a fresh pair of eyes on it. And I did say a trusted group of readers, because you can't just take everyone's advice. Everyone will have a different thing to say about your book, and some of it you'll be thinking, oh no, and some of it you'll be thinking, oh yeah, definitely. So you'll know after a few tries whether someone is sort of au fait with what you're trying to achieve. So find that group of trusted writers, and then take their feedback, because the third thing I would say is that editing just makes such a difference. Like, the first thing I kind of spewed out onto the page bears very little resemblance to what people now pick up in the book. And like I said before, I wrote it and then I completely rewrote it. And that, like that second version was so much stronger and more compelling and tighter and better. And so don't see the editing process as just a little thing you do at the end to kind of clean up a few typos or whatever. It's actually fundamental. And the more you do, I'm just always astonished at how much even a relatively light edit can improve a book. Taking out a scene, taking out a character, just can tighten the whole thing up and change the focus. So those are my 3 pieces of advice.
I think that especially your second piece of advice, to share it with others to read it, is I went to an event with Christian White, author Christian White, last week, and he said he lost 10 years by never showing anybody his work. And he started sharing his work, everything changed for him. So I think that's an excellent piece of advice.
Yeah, it is. I lost way too many years thinking, I've got this, I know I can write, I'm just going to press on and keep having a go. And if I'd done like this course I did, years ago, I would have been years ahead of where I am now. It basically, it's getting help from other people and getting second opinion, because other people will see things straight away that you'll say, oh yeah, I didn't realize that.
Can you share a book that you're enjoying at the moment or you've just read? And you can share more than one. It's fine.
Yes, it's very hard to choose. It's very hard to choose. Like I read a lot, like most writers, and I read a lot of crime, but I also really like literary fiction as well. So combining those two things a little bit, I was going to say that I recently finished Kate Atkinson's book, Death at the Sign of the Rook. So readers might know Kate Atkinson's got a detective called Jackson Brodie, and this is the most recent book in a series featuring that detective. And what I really love about Kate Atkinson, she writes so beautifully. She's won all sorts of prizes, but she's also really humorous. Like this particular book has got scenes in it. I won't give any spoilers, but I just kind of laughed out loud. Like one scene is particularly farcical. And if readers have read the book, they might know what I'm talking about. And I just found it so hilarious. But even though it's farcical, Kate Atkinson handles it so well that it doesn't seem ridiculous. It just sort of fits in so beautifully. And all her characters are so beautifully drawn. Some of them are comic, some of them are sad. And she just fits it all together into an overarching story that's so easy to read, so enjoyable, but also packs a real punch. So I think she's a great writer. And I finished that a month or so ago. And then on the literary side of things, I really loved Elizabeth Strout's latest book. So she is an American writer. And what I find so impressive about her writing, she writes about just the most ordinary things. She writes about small towns in Northeast America, sort of characters, quite a lot of them are sort of a bit older. They have very quiet lives. They spend a lot of time in their own homes. So she's just writing about day-to-day life in a home where nothing particularly dramatic is happening, but she just makes it so engrossing, like unputdownable, like a thriller. And I read it and I'm trying to work out how she does it, and I can't work it out, but she does it. And I would actually really love, like my book's got some fairly dramatic events in it, which I sort of felt like I needed to make it interesting. But I would love to be able to get to the stage like Elizabeth Strout, where she just puts such simple things on the page, but she writes about it so beautifully that she keeps you engrossed. So I really admire her as well.
Now you're in a really great group called the Debut Crew for 2025. What do you think it is about Australian writing lately that it's become so big, the number of authors that are being published each year, and especially in crime? It must be lovely to have a group supporting you.
Yeah, it is. It's really great, actually. And I came upon that group sort of by accident. Like it's not exclusive in any way, but it's just really word of mouth on how it spreads. It's not like the publishers give you a contract and then say, and now you need to sign up to this group. It's really just sort of word of mouth. And it started a year or two ago with, I think, a couple of friends who asked their friends, and it grew from there. And what it really does is helps demystify the publishing process, because it's quite an opaque industry, and you've got this massive mountain to climb to write your book and edit it and maybe get an agent and then finally get a publisher. And then you think, oh, wow, I got it. I climbed to the top of the mountain. And then you realize, oh, there's all these other things that have to happen. I don't really know what they're all about. Like, how does it work choosing a cover? And what does my publicist do? And how long am I going to get for my copy edits? And can I really kind of complain about the cover I've got? And all these questions that aren't written down anywhere. And you may not have the first clue. So this is a group of people who are going through the same thing. Some of them might be months ahead because it's defined by if you've got your first book coming out within that particular calendar year. And it's just a great place to ask questions and share the ups and downs, like people talking about difficulties with their agents or not liking the cover they're given or feeling like they've only been given a few days to do pages and pages of copy edits, and people just sort of muck in and provide a lot of support. And it's all really very positive and supportive. So it's great, actually. It's a real benefit. And I happened to find out about this call for books for reading by candlelight via that group. So I'm really glad I joined, because sometimes you get new opportunities that you might not otherwise have gotten. And I've gone to people's book launches and met people that way. And so it sort of helps you grow basically your professional network, I guess, which is really important, because writing's such a isolated activity. I mean, most of it's spent by yourself at your desk alone. You wouldn't necessarily make a lot of contacts and friends doing that. So a group where you can meet other people going through the same thing that you're going through is really useful.
It is, and the writing community is a very friendly place.
Yes, indeed. Yes, I mean we're all nice people. We're not. I'm not trying to make a fortune. I mean, we wouldn't object to making a fortune, but we're doing something we love, and I think that is a real glue that sticks everyone together, because we're all doing something we love, and we all know it's a bit of a weird thing to do, sit by yourself just in front of a computer or a notebook, writing, making things up, putting words onto the page. It's a bit odd. Not everyone gets it. And so a group of people who get it, it's really nice. You can feel quite comfortable and at home there.
Now that leads us to this question. What are you working on now? Are you allowed to tell us?
Oh, it's not a secret. I haven't got definite ideas, but the next book after this one would share a few characteristics, which you might be able to guess from what I've already said. So it will almost certainly be a psychological thriller. It will almost certainly have a natural Australian landscape. It probably won't be the bush. I'll probably go for a different kind of landscape. And it may well have a dual timeline. I'll almost certainly have a buried secret from the past that somehow reemerges to bother people in the present. So it won't be wildly different from the reunion, but I can't say anything more specific than that at the moment.
That's fine. Yes, we're very aware that you can't always tell us what's going on. Now, believe it or not, that's time on our interview, didn't it?
Time flies when you're having fun.
It does. And I'd like to thank you, Bronwyn, for chatting with me and for being Reading by Candlelight's February crime and thriller book box author.
Oh, absolutely my pleasure, Fiona. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
Now, The Reunion is a gripping thriller about a day that changes the characters forever. It is a story of friendship, grief, secrets, and lies. It's atmospheric, gothic, fabulous mystery, dual timelines. We all know that. I love them. And it's definitely a twisty thriller. It questions everything you think as we learn what happened all those years ago. And I am sure that our book box readers are going to love it. Now, we'd like to hear what you think about it in the Reading by Candlelight Facebook group or on Instagram. And thank you all for coming along tonight and watching us live. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening to the podcast, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you again, Bronwyn.
My pleasure, Fiona. Thanks very much.
And wishing everybody happy reading and goodbye for now.